the circumference of the Earth. So that's what Taylor started, making this connection between this infinite value pi and this inanimate structure, the Great Pyramid. So there's that book. So then C. Piazzi Smyth, who was a famous scientist, he was the Astronomer Royal for the nation of Scotland. Now that's a great honor, to be the leading meteorologist of your country. You are, you know, the in charge of understanding the heavens for your whole country. He was the Astronomer Royal for the nation of Scotland. Well, he read John Taylor's book, and he said, wow. And basically, he took his life savings, he took his wife, moved into one of those tombs that's next to the Great Pyramid. His wife put up with that. They turned one of those old tombs into a place, and he spent about a year there, used all his life savings, brought all the best camera instrumentation for measuring that was available at that time, and he spent at least a year measuring the Great Pyramid to test out if what John Taylor said was true. Is this monument really a pi pyramid, and is it really a model of planet Earth? And if it was, well, supposedly the Greeks are the ones that figured out the circumference of the Earth, and they come thousands of years later. How did the ancient Egyptians know? So those are all questions that came in. So C. Piazzi Smyth became a firm believer in John Taylor's stuff. And when he was measuring the length of the pyramid, it came down to the casing stones. In his day, the pyramid was covered over with sand, and the casing stones, most of them were taken. And there's mosques all over Cairo that are built with the casing stones that were taken off the Great Pyramid, but there was a few left when they got rid of the sand. And so, because what the pyramid as it exists now doesn't have the original casing stones, so the casing stones would have made the outside measurement farther than without them. And he realized that his measurement was a key in if this really is a scale model of the Earth or not. Because I don't want to invent numbers. If this is really a scale model of the Earth, those numbers should be there, and C. Piazzi Smyth was a man of principle. And so he came up with a set of measurements built on where he thought the casing stones came now that they cleared it away enough. And that was providential, because he didn't know how he was going to get the money to do that. You know, it's just picture if this whole building was covered with sand and stuff. It might seem like a simple thing to shovel, but start picturing all of us with a shovel right now. And the mountain that's, it was a huge thing. So he didn't think he was going to be able to, he'd already put his life savings up. Turned out there just happened to be, I think it was an Italian crew that came through there, and he talked to them. He said, oh yeah, we'll help you do that. So somehow they did it. So, okay. So those two, the tradition of pyramidology, we could say, that's a term that's used negatively by Egyptologists today, but at this time, when Christianity was probably part of the superstructure, we'd say, not I'd say secular science is now the reigning motif that's used in public schools and whatnot. That came in through, so there's Sir Flinders Petrie. Sir Flinders Petrie was the father of a famous explorer, you could say, maybe, and so he wanted to go measure what C. Piazzi Smyth said, to see for himself if it was true. And his dad was a firm believer in C. Piazzi Smyth. I'm not sure if I pronounce it Smith or Smyth. I just keep saying Smith. Flinders Petrie knew that his dad was a friend of C. Piazzi Smyth and was a believer in what C. Piazzi Smyth was measuring and teaching. And so he went there with the latest instruments, even beyond those of C. Piazzi Smyth. And he too sacrificed for over a year. He had colds, and head colds, and different. Back then, the air chambers, the air shafts that had now been explored with robots, those were filled with bat dung and stuff, and the ventilation in the pyramid wasn't there. And even with the headaches and the gagging he was getting, he still worked diligently. He was a true scientist, Flinders Petrie. So, long story short, when he came to those casing stones to now prove or disprove the findings of C. Piazzi Smyth, he came up with a different set of measurements, because he said, it's kind of technical, but where the pyramids came, where the casing stones came to the corner was on a platform that was I think, about 12 inches higher than where C. Piazzi Smith, and so we got a different measurement for the length. And he said something like, because he was a true scientist, I was sorry to find the numbers that made, I'll put it in my own terms, made C. Piazzi Smith an idiot. Because again, his father had been a disciple of C. Piazzi Smith. His father would be upset with his son if he didn't come up with measurements. So this is when those that had maybe a Christian viewpoint or tried to put some kind of divine interpretation on the pyramid were basically shut down. Sir Flinders Petrie is called by many today the father of Egyptology. You know, a man of high character, but didn't believe any of the spiritual stuff about the pyramid. It just simply was a scientific measure of the pyramid. So I just got this book in the mail a day or two ago. It was just published, I think, like yesterday. I think the official publication of this book just came out, The Great Pyramid Operations Manual. And it's a compendium, supposedly, of everything that's ever been studied about the Great Pyramid and stuff. So I looked at this, and there's some very interesting stuff in here. But I looked in the index. John Taylor is not in the index, and C. Piazzi Smith is not in the index. So the work of Sir Flinders Petrie, the scientific work of getting the right measurements for the pyramid, you guys are lunatics, you're pyramidologists, and so you're not going to make it into the index of that book. Anybody heard of Chris Dunn? Chris Dunn? Okay, yeah. What do you know about him? Not to put you on the spot.
Everything I know I saw on Ancient Aliens. So.
Okay.
Engineer, scientist, lives in southern Illinois.
No, it's actually eastern Illinois.
Eastern Illinois?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he's, as I said, he's just finishing his tour in Egypt. He just had like a 15-day tour there. So I spent some time with him, and I make a lot of 1-minute videos for my Instagram account. So, and this is the cover of his book, by the way. It's called Giza Power Plant. And so he says, let's see, who is, Mary Hardy. Yeah, okay. So some of the stuff you wrote, Mary Hardy, she gave me this and she said, here's her view of the pyramid, and so I read it, Mary. And so some of what Chris Dunn says fits some of what you were saying here. He believes that one of the purposes of the Great Pyramid, it was a great resonance box, and so it was meant to be a benign benefactor to the planet, so that seismic eruptions and stuff could be sort of shock absorbed, to use a better term, by the Great Pyramid. That's one of the things he taught. So I spent some time with Chris. So this is his book right here. Willem Verhart contacted me. I'm the director now. Since I retired as a teacher, I reinvigorated a not-for-profit research organization I founded many years ago called the American Institute for Pyramid Research. And so Willem contacted me with a paper. He's an amateur mathematician in Spain. And in his paper, he basically shows that in the sarcophagus of Djedefre, who was Khufu's son, built the pyramid up in Abu Rash, about 13 kilometers north of the Great Pyramid, that sarcophagus showed that the Egyptians had knowledge of the meter. Now, when was the meter invented? Anybody know? The French, Napoleon, when Napoleon brought his savants to the Great Pyramid in the end of the 18th century, they mapped and measured everything. And so that was the time of the Enlightenment. So let's do everything rationally, and so why don't we have a measuring system based on tens, decimeter, centimeter, let's do that. And so to find out what a meter is, we'll take the 1/10,000,000th part of a quadrant that goes from the pole to the equator through Paris, because they're French, so it's got to be Paris. So they sent two guys out on an expedition, one in each direction, so they could measure what that was, so they could then take the 1/10,000,000th part of that, and it would be the meter. So if that was invented in 1796 or 1799, whatever it was, how in the heck could William Verhard be sending the AIP, my research organization, a paper about how the ancient Egyptians had the meter? Anybody see a conundrum there or problem?
Possible the Egyptians knew the meter before it was invented? The numbers are a wonderful thing. Pythagoras says they're the cause of gods. Kepler says that where there's matter, there's geometry. And Plato says numbers are knowledge itself. So these guys found the biggest thing since zero, the meter. The French Academy under Napoleon sent Lombard and Machine out to measure the quadrant from the pole to the equator through Paris. And what they came up with was close to a meter, and so the meter was invented. But William Verhard of Spain sent us a paper showing that the dimensions of the sarcophagus of Pharaoh Gedeftri of the 4th dynasty, brother of Khufu, shows that they knew the meter. Here's the sarcophagus, and here's its measurements, and the diagonal is exactly 1 meter. Incredible. So I interviewed Mr. Verhard. Go to our YouTube channel. Is it in all 4 coffins, or just... Fascinating. Follow Sage Silent or our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so a little bit about my evolution and understanding the pyramids. So as a young man, I went out in search of my soul. I did something everybody should do and nobody does. I sold everything I had. I bought an old Jeep at that time, 1973. I bought a 52 Willys, so 62, so I was 21 years old. Willys was one of the first thing like a Jeep. I put a sign on the side, Alaska or bust. I kissed my girlfriend goodbye, my mother goodbye. I got in the Jeep and I took off for Alaska. I still remember pulling onto Arlington Heights Road, onto 90, and starting to cry like, what in the hell am I doing? And so I stopped. I had like a gunslinger, puts notches in his gun every time I get somebody. I had a book, and every time I'd stop and talk with somebody, major conversation about life and meaning. Because I was a college graduate, but I was really going in search of my soul. I thought, I want to find the meaning of life. And I know the philosophers say you can search, but you'll never find it. But I thought that's stupid. Why waste time searching if there's not hope of finding it? So I honestly went out in search of my soul. That's the thing I said everybody should do, but nobody does. But I did it. It's a fact. I can show you pictures of Alaska or bust. Took off kissing my mom goodbye. And so I would stop at churches. I'm St. Thomas Seminary, Oskaloosa, Iowa, Sacred Heart, all the churches, universities, anybody that I could talk to about the meaning of life. And long story short, I ended up believing that Jesus was my Lord. That was my conversion story in 1974. So somehow from there I started reading Adam Rutherford, who wrote a lot about the Great Pyramid. And he had an institute in Harpenden, England called the Institute of Pyramidology. Anybody ever hear about that? Any old timers know about that? Yeah. He put out a 4-volume set called Pyramidology. He sent out newsletters all around the world. He gave talks around the world. And then he died, and his son took over the institute. And his son died tragically in a car accident. And so the Institute of Pyramidology, the one organized witness in the world, it was centered around the idea that the Great Pyramid had a divine revelation of some kind. I thought to myself as a young man, I don't have the money to reinvigorate that institute. Mrs. Rutherford, still alive at that time, didn't care anything about it. So I just thought all that research, all that stuff was going to be gone. So that was at the infancy of the internet. That was, 35 years ago. And I got to thinking, you know what? I could probably start a virtual institute. I can't afford publishing houses. I can't afford sending out newsletters. I can't afford postage. I can't afford a secretary for a mailing list. And so I started my institute virtually. And there was a time 20 years ago where you could do a search for Great Pyramid, and my site came up #1. Many years, all over the world. I'd sometimes go into a library somewhere, be somewhere else, and just out of curiosity, I'd go and Google wasn't the search engine then, it was like Northern Lights on the search engine. Go and type Great Pyramid, and my site came up #1. So I started the American Institute of Pyramid Research. And basically my belief, accepting Rutherford, because he was like my father in this, that the Great Pyramid was a revelation from God, Isaiah 19, but the rest of the stuff was pagan. All these other pyramids were pagan, and that was kind of a standard view, 19th century Christians, you know, their view of the world, where everybody was a pagan except for them. And so I just inherited that idea from Adam Rutherford. Well, and this is the scripture that many people think places the Great Pyramid in the Bible. In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border. There's a conundrum. How can you be in the midst of something and at the border? Okay? I'm in the center of this room right now, in the midst of the room. Am I at the border of this room? No. Okay? Right now, I'm on the border of this room. Am I in the midst of the room? No. So that's a conundrum. That's a conundrum. The Great Pyramid solves that conundrum. Giza, it's the Great Pyramid of Giza. You know, Giza means border. Giza is the border between Upper and Lower Egypt. That's the border. But if you look at where it is at the bottom of the delta, the Great Pyramid's right in the middle of Egypt. The Great Pyramid's at the middle, and it's at the border. So it says it shall be an altar. So that's something you think of God or something with an altar. And a pillar, I think the Hebrew is matzitzabah, and it means like a monument, a pillar, a monument. At the border thereof to the Lord. So this scripture, if it's right, and if that's not the Great Pyramid, then you tell me what that is. I mean, what's it referring to? It's got to be something that's in the midst of Egypt and at the border of Egypt. How many things fit that other than the Great Pyramid? So it says it'll be a sign to the and a witness unto the Lord of hosts. So it's a witness of God. The scripture in the land of Egypt. For they shall cry unto the Lord because of oppressors, and he shall send them a Savior. So that's what I thought, you know, centered the Great Pyramid in my thinking. But then I started studying Robert Pahl's Orion Correlation theory, you know, that the 3 stars in Orion's belt are in direct correlation to the 3 pyramids in the Giza Plateau, and a bunch of other things, and I began to realize, no, it's not that the Great Pyramid is, you know, from God, everything else is pagan. It's like I just, you know, and any one of us in our life, when new information comes in, you got to grow, you got to advance, you got to learn. You can't stay static. You can't, you know, like an old fart, stay there and, you know, die in your stupidity. When new information comes, you got to adapt, you got to adjust, you got to grow, right? Mm-hmm. All right? Okay, so. Okay, we're going to take a closer look at the Orion Correlation theory, the well-known theory from Robert Pahl that the 3 stars in Orion's belt correspond with the 3 pyramids on the Giza Plateau. But it's not just on the Giza Plateau. Those same 3 stars in Orion's belt correspond with the pyramids in Mexico, the pyramids in China, other pyramids in Egypt, and even pyramids in Japan. So the focus is really on Orion, not on the pyramids. What do the stars in the constellation Orion mean? Because we know they came from Enoch, Thoth, the original Hermes. Well, we find out that Betelgeuse and Bellatrix, the 2 shoulder stars, mean the sudden destroying, the swiftly coming. The stars in the belt are named cubit and yard, like the Egyptian Mat, the standard that you're going to be measured by. This is the ultimate Osiris, the judge. And Enoch tells us who this judge is, because in Jude 14, Enoch is quoted, "Behold, the Lord will come with 10,000 of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all." He's speaking about the second coming of Christ. You know, a lot of people believe in the second coming of Christ. Some conservative Christians do, but, you know, Muslims believe in the second coming of Christ too. It's a Muslim belief, so it's a lot of people that believe in that. And then, so with the Orion Correlation theory, I had to realize that, you know, either I have to say it's all pagan or it's all from God. They've got, you know, there's some bigger connection here, you know, ley lines and that kind of thing. So William Zittman has an interesting book. But it's not just those 3 stars that are in alignment. There's a connection in many ways between all of the pyramids in Egypt. Here I am on horseback at the south face of the Great Pyramid where the Solar Boat Museum is. So that was Pharaoh Khufu's boat. And it's well known that pharaohs believed those boats were going to carry them to Osiris in the afterlife, in the age to come. And so the boats, they had various forms, but they looked like this. Philip Coppens, in his book, The New Pyramid Age, says that the major pyramids along the Nile form a boat when connected. So I took Google Earth, I printed it out, I plotted all the major pyramids, and lo and behold, all the major pyramids along the Nile form a boat. There's an interconnection here. So as I began to see this evidence, I realized that there was a bigger plan. And so that led me to believe that, just as I said, the Sears Tower just needs one designer. A lot of people who built it. There was probably a master designer. It's probably Enoch, Thoth, Hermes. I call him a god now, but they were just a very intelligent, powerful man from the past. And they become deified as time goes on. I call them the Egyptian deities. And so they probably was a master plan for the layout of all those pyramids. And so, somehow you have to explain how things like that happen. There's a lot of other evidences of things like that. These are just a couple that I'm grabbing from. And then the book, The Giza Prophecy, a fairly recent book by Gary Osborne, and you got a co-author in that. So I began to realize, so here's a top view of these pyramids, and you can see where the stars in Orion are. And you can see there's a circle formed by the formation of the pyramids. It touches the satellite pyramid here, it touches the corner of the Great Pyramid, it touches the corner of Menkare's pyramid, and the Sphinx is right on the outside of that circle. This is the circle of the ecliptic. So it's the zodiac that's forming this. When I saw this, again, I had to realize there's no way that that this is the one that's from God and everything else is pagan. There's obviously, even though the Egyptologists don't think it's obvious, there's obviously a greater plan here. It doesn't just so happen Sphinx is just placed on that line by chance, and these pyramids, which were built years apart. So I wrote this poem. Actually, no, this is a piece of prose I wrote. Part of the purpose of these silent sages, that's what I call the pyramids. They're silent, but they're thundering, really. These silent sages is to inspire this ineffable awe, a connection to the Creator. You've been to the pyramids, don't you feel that? How many of you have been to the pyramids? Isn't it incredible? Don't you have an incredible remembrance of what that does for you?
King's Chamber.
And so this purpose, shared by Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, is to attract attention to the mysteries, revelations, and warnings housed in these sentinels of wonder. Something smaller, conceived on a smaller scale, wouldn't invite such attention. The Giza Trinity, Khafre, the father, in the center, appearing the tallest, still crowned. It appears the tallest, but actually the Great Pyramid is actually 10 feet taller. Khufu, the Logos, the one who came to show the Father, full of revelation, missing the Pyramidion until he is crowned with glory at his return. And then Menkaure, offset, different as the electron to the proton-neutron, content to bring glory to the other two. The Giza Trinity, reflecting the glory of the Creator. So I'm suggesting that just as everything that we see is made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and so the Father, Son, and the Spirit, it's like an essential part of the center of the universe. And this poem I wrote, though desert ravaged, pocked with wrinkled scars, gigantic stones provide oasis powers. These hoary pillars harbor secret powers, a mystery connected to the stars. Of wonders of the world there's none their peer, imposing elders unperturbed by fear, forgiving of Egyptologic fail, that never sees the sage behind the veil. Yet inner places of these stones proclaim an ancient story now and then the same. Through narrow passage and by sandstorm strife, beyond this veil there's resurrection life. Oh, the treasures that these stones have showered me, divine proportions, Khufu's dowry. Though pharaohs die, still pyramids proclaim, live again, Orion is your name. so again, this is from that book, and it just shows that he leaves the Khafre pyramid out here, but you can see that there's a line between Menkaure and the Khufu pyramid, that the pyramids are on the edge forming this circle, and that the Sphinx is aligned at a certain date. So he's trying to make a point about the date here.
If you're like me and you look up in the heavens, you don't see all those constellations that the zodiac tells us are there. You just see a bunch of bright lights. We know the ancient Egyptians paid a lot of attention to the stars. Their pyramids pointed to the stars. So where does the naming of these constellations come from? That this is Orion, and those stars indicate Orion. But where does that come back from? Because I would challenge you, if you had asked 1 million fifth graders, what's pictured by those stars? If they didn't have the picture of Orion, they'd never say, oh, I see a mighty hunter there raising his club and holding a lion skin. They'd never say it, not 1 in a million. So there must be an adequate cause to explain this effect. Enoch is the original Thoth, Hermes, the father of writing, highly skilled. He's the one with Adam who helped name the constellations. So the big question becomes then, what do they mean?
So I'm suggesting that part of the fact that the pyramids do have these passages that are aligned to constellation and stars means there must be a message in the stars. Look at Psalm 19 earlier about how the message of the stars speaks in all languages. And that could probably be a good stopping point for me too. So the question would be, you know, it seems like the pyramids, one of the things they're doing is pointing us to the stars. So the question is, what do the stars mean? And I once got into a Jeep and went in search of my soul. Well, I've got to go and search at questions like that. What do they mean? So, did the Great Pyramid undergo 3 plan changes? And of course, Fitzbillion already talked about this because that's the standard Egyptological model. Khufu was going to have his burial in the Subterranean Chamber, which is down there. And then that didn't work out, and so he's going to be buried in the Queen's Chamber, which is right there. And then, oh, you know, 3's a charm. It didn't work there, so now we'll put him up there. It just, again, to me, it just, theories like that just treat the Egyptians like they're imbeciles, like they're fools, like they're little kids in a playground. Like, oh, we'll build a pyramid. Oh, I think we'll add a room here. We didn't like that burial place. Like the Great Pyramid was planned from the beginning as part of the master plan. So a theory like this just doesn't come up to, you know, honoring Egyptians. Let me about where are we on time? What are we about time?
Have another 25 minutes
Okay,
for your break.
Okay, I'll try not to take all that. But so one of my areas of research, I'm going to Egypt in a few days. I'll be there for about 3 weeks, and I'm going to be doing some research. And one of the I'm going to be meeting with some people from Antiquities, the Department of Antiquities in Egypt, about the trial passages. So here is a side view of the trial passages. The trial passages are on the Giza Plateau. They're about 100 yards to the east of the Great Pyramid. And Sir Flinders Petrie, who I've already talked about, said that the trial passages were built at the same time and by the same people that built the Great Pyramid. And yet you don't have to climb up a big pyramid and pay money and all this stuff. They're right there. And so I wanted to research that. And let's see here. So the Subterranean Chamber corresponds with this part of the trial passage. They're called the trial passages because they mimic the passages inside the Great Pyramid. So here's the Queen's Chamber, and here's the Queen's Chamber right here.